Hello, everyone, and welcome to Testimony of the Goodness of God. Thank you for being with us today. We're so glad to have you. We have a wonderful show set up for you today, a live recording of a testimony. Instead of grabbing one off the internet or grabbing off someone I may know that was pre-recorded, this one will be recorded live. Now, it'll obviously be edited before we send it out. But I look forward to this. We're going to be talking with a guy I have known for many years, really good friends with he and his wife. His name is Mark, and we'll be setting it up here in just a moment. We're also going to start reading a verse of the day. Every time we have a podcast to publish, we're going to use a verse from the Bible, and the verse we choose will lead right into our testimony. Hopefully, we can tie the two together. And if you have a testimony that you would like to give us, drop us a line or an email. Us old guys say drop us a line as you used to write a letter. Believe it or not, we used to write letters to one another a lot. But drop us an email at tgoodnessofgod@gmail.com. tgoodnessofgod@gmail.com. And we will reply and we'll try to get through your testimony. I can read it on the air, or we can do a live interview as we're going to do today. But however you want to do it. And I know everyone that believes in God has a great testimony of God's goodness. All right, here is the verse of the day. It is Matthew 7, verses 19 and 20. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them. Matthew 7, verses 19 and 20. So I hope you enjoyed that verse that we used today. Take it with you and study it, and hopefully it'll help you out through your walk with Christ. So now we're getting ready to set up the interview today, and I want to introduce a really, really good friend of mine, the one I've been telling you all about. He is in Phoenix, Arizona now, enjoying the winter, and that's where he lives now with his lovely wife, Kimberly. Mark Davis, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, Mr. Moore. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Just loving life. And I really appreciate you agreeing to be my first live interview for our podcast. That's really appreciative. Hopefully this will break the mold and I'll get a lot more people here locally. I think a few people's a little shy about coming on a podcast, you know?
Yeah, I can understand that. It's one thing. It's like putting a Jesus fish on the back of your car. I mean, it's one thing to drive and be a Christian. It's another thing to put that Jesus fish and know that everybody on the planet is
Absolutely.
going to see that and see your driving, see your attitude. So
Absolutely.
it is a little harder to actually put your money with it.
Yeah, when I got saved and I had my testimony, I just wanted to testimonies going about the greatness or goodness of God. So again, I really appreciate you stepping up and doing this with me. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is the testimony of Mark Davis.
Yeah, so thank you again, Steve. I've been listening to your podcast for a while, and really, the very first one, when you kind of threw it out there to have testimonies, I was really led kind of reach out to you and see if we could share some time with going through what I've my journey, my path the last 53 years. This actually, my testimony came as part of a Bible study I did about 12 years ago, where we collectively said, hey, like, this is something we need to do. We need to write down, once for all, kind of how our testimony went, how we came to know Jesus, and just so that we can have it and be more structured. And so with my testimony, actually, my testimony is kind of two parts. First part is kind of like the unremarkable testimony. I've listened to a lot of the really great testimonies on your podcast, and I've listened to, and during the course of my life, heard so many, and so many of them are, there was drugs, there was alcohol, there was all these bad, horrible things, that happened before they came to know Jesus. And for the first half of my life, really, that was not the case. I could not have had a more unremarkable journey at that point in time. I grew up in a Christian home my entire life. We went to church every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Sunday night. My mom and dad did not drink. We didn't have anything like that in the house. And it wasn't like they were, pounded like, don't do it. It just was never there. So I didn't grow up with it. So for the first really 19 and a half, 20 years of my life, things were pretty good. But at the same time, it was kind of like, and this is, if my testimony is, the time of my testimony is, and God's your uncle. That's kind of the way it was for me. God was just kind of like that uncle. Yeah, you kind of saw holidays and Christmas time and weddings and stuff like that, but it was not really a big part of your life. And
right. Did you
I
have
wasn't doing anything wrong.
Right. Did you have a concept of what salvation is, or were you just going through the motions through your Christian life, through church, where it was like a routine maybe? Or did you really know what the gift that God was and to be saved and that kind of thing.
No, I really truly did know what it was to be saved.
Good.
So, I mean, even at a pretty young age, just because I really got it, you know, and
Right.
I understood the concept of, you know, hell. I understood the concept of, you know, what we all deserve is, you know, as human beings and sinners. I really did get that, but practically, I didn't really know how to apply it because, you know, I hadn't really, to that point in my life, I hadn't been challenged.
Right.
You know, Satan hadn't really challenged me with anything. And I live in a home where I wasn't locked down, but I couldn't say I had the freedom to just do whatever I want to do.
Right.
So yeah, I had gotten to that point where I even talked to people, you know, members of my own family. They actually would come to my mom and say, "What is up with your kid? He's talking about Jesus and stuff like that." And I did. Like, I knew, I mean, I love God, I love Jesus, but at the same time, like, again, I had never tasted freedom. Like, I had never tasted the world yet.
Right.
So even though I was to that point, I truly believe at that point in time I was saved, like, I had not experienced what was about to come.
Okay.
And then, yeah, actually, even as part of that, my freshman year of college, I was with Campus Crusade too. So, I mean, we were going down the beaches. There's nothing like trying to talk to a drunk 20-year-old on the beach of Daytona Beach during, so you'll get some reactions.
I can only imagine.
But you would be surprised though, because even at that age, a lot of kids didn't grow up like I grew up. So,
Right.
I mean, they had been dabbling in drugs and alcohol since, you know, they were 12, 13, 14 years old.
Right.
So by the time they ran into my group on the beach of Daytona Beach, like a lot of them, you know, you'd be surprised how many of them they were burned. They were burned out. They were looking for something,
Right.
Some other kind of life. And they were interested in learning. And of course, we had some cute girls in our campus today, so some of them probably just stopped and listened to the cute girls. But there was a lot of people that really did have an interest in what we had to say.
Right.
And so that was kind of up until, you know, that point in time, I was good. And I think that's probably one of the misconceptions that people have about Christians just in general is that they should be perfect. Like, if you say you're a Christian, you should be perfect. You should do no wrong. You should
Right.
never mess up. And
Right.
you know, so I think that's the perception, and that's as Christians, that's what we live with every single day.
Every day.
The world judging us. Of course, you got the enemy that's just right there waiting for you to mess up and say, "What kind of? You're not a Christian. Like, you're horrible. Like look what you just did. Look what you just said." You know, like, so I think that's the hard part about, you know, my testimony coming through, where I was kind of living a sheltered life, so that when I did get out and I did get freedom, you know, later on in college, and I did, you know, start, you know, partying, and I start having fun, healthy relationships, and I started having, you know, a taste of what the world was. I think it's even harder, you know, when you grew up like how I grew up, because, man, Satan he's even more there ready to just say, "Look how you screwed up. I mean, like, first 19 years of your life, you were great. Now look at you. Look at how horrible you are. Look at what, you know, look at all the different things you're messing up." And that was really, really hard, because I came from a house where we just performed. And that's how I grew up, and, you know, good grades, sports, everything. It wasn't like my mom and dad drove it into us, but that's just how I grew up. And so it's even harder when you go through the life I did, and then get to a portion of your life where you're really it just seems like you're screwing up every other day, you know, with something. It starts to wear you down. It starts to wear you down, and it did for me, to the point where, gosh, it was probably my fourth year in college, or my fourth year of college. Like, I had enough, you know, and I've been partying for like 2 years. I mean, I was just a baby in the party scene.
Right.
And it rocked me so hard that just short amount of time. It was so hard for me, and the guilt and everything else, and again, just the enemy just chirping in my ear. Like, I got to a point where I wanted to end my life. I didn't want to live. I was fully confident. I was fully confident in my salvation, which I know is kind of contradictory, that I'd be partying but saved. But again, I was just a kid, and I didn't realize that as a Christian, you can't do both. Like,
No.
both can't coexist.
No.
And not before you hit that breaking point. And I did, and, you know, I tried to end my own life at the end of that summer of my fourth year of college, because I was done. I was done with it, you know, and I hadn't even really experienced it yet. But I'm still done with it. But luckily, you know, God was there in so many different ways. That's a whole different podcast we could do about that night. But needless to say, buddy wrist, buddy arm, in the back of a train in Knoxville, Tennessee. Police officers found me in the back of this train about 30 seconds, a couple minutes away from that train leaving for Atlanta, Georgia.
Wow.
And I'd have been dead. I mean,
Wow.
it's the whole night. It's an amazing story when I think about it, and
Right.
you know, just the whole night and just everything that led up to it. But so you would think that would be enough. That would have been enough for me. I've been right back on the track. I've been right, and to some degree I was. I definitely gave me a different perspective on my life and my place in this life. The time that I had from that moment on, for the last 35 years has been, just kind of just extra time that I shouldn't have had. But I did, it didn't click, and I ended up getting married to somebody I should have never been married. We had a kid, and that did not last very long because it was so wrong on many different levels, even though I tried to convince myself it was right. And I was doing the right things. Like I was doing, it didn't work out, but like we were going to church. We were doing the right things, kind of going through the motions. I really wasn't witnessing, but like I wasn't partying. Like, I had a kid and I was just newly married. I was just trying to do everything I was trying to do.
Right.
And it didn't work out. And when you try to do all that stuff right and it doesn't work out, of course, the first person you're going to blame is God.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like I did everything.
Right.
I did everything you told me
to do, and now look at me. What are you doing? Absolutely. That's just another trick of the enemy. Seeks to steal, kill, and destroy. Absolutely.
And so, at that point in time, I kind of went back to just being that uncle again. I wasn't mad at God, but I'm like, I'm wasting my time with you now, God. Like, now I'm kind of like, again, I'm still saved, but I'm like, I'm to that point now where I'm just confused about life and confused about how life is supposed to work.
Right.
Granted, I was saved, but I was not in the Word every day. Like, I had never read the Bible cover to cover.
Right.
I knew verses, and I'd even memorized some verses in Sunday school and stuff like that. But I really didn't know what it meant to be a Christian, even though, I was one, but I didn't, the what comes after. I think that's, sometimes churches, every church doesn't always do the best job of explaining that and preparing people for that, because the fact of the matter is, once you become a Christian, like, you kind of get that bullseye. The enemy has now got because when you're not a Christian, like, the enemy doesn't care about you. Like, you're already his. You're already his. You're good to go. He doesn't bother you. He doesn't need to bother you because you're doing everything he wants you to do. Once you change, once you become a Christian, once you actually wake up and take those glasses off and you see the world, you see everything for what it is. Now he's worried. Now he's a little worried because now you're a little dangerous. Now you're doing podcast feed more. Right. Now you're doing testimonies more. Like, now you're doing these things he don't want you to do.
No, he doesn't want anything to do with that.
No, but he's the weaker. He's the weaker of the power that we have. So,
Absolutely.
I got to a point after that where, I kind of went back, to the party scene a little bit, but not quite like college. It was just, I was just kind of apathetic about things. I just, again, you gotta realize that I'd already had the experience with suicide, so there was that in my mind. Not that I'd ever want to do that again, but just the concept of life was different for me, and what comes next was different for me. Like, okay, I did it this way, like, none of this stuff seems to work. It really, honestly, it was really, in about 2012, I was doing, my dad and I kind of connected, and he was looking for somebody to go through the Bible a year with him, and so I was like, I'll do it with you. We can do it. He and I started doing a Bible of the year. I think actually it's the one that I gave you. So we started doing that, and we met every couple weeks, Saturday morning, and we would just kind of go through stuff. I found out stuff about my dad, going through that Bible study. And my dad was a super strong Christian, went to prisons, was in prison ministry, and just, many, many just awesome things.
Right.
But just some of his weak points, like we talked like man to man. It's the first time we'd ever really talked man to man about stuff, and not father to son. Just hearing, we talked about swearing one day, and I was like, yeah, my weak one. I sometimes I drop the F-bomb every now and then. That's still one of my weaknesses.
Right.
Because sometimes I still drop the GD every now and then because that's what my dad did every now and then. So it's just so interesting and refreshing to have that conversation with my dad because again we'd never bonded like that. We'd never shared anything like that before.
That kind of reminds me of Mom when we grew up together. I was born in the '60s to a single mom, so we had to grow up together because we didn't have anybody else at the time. But when we got there to the end of her life's journey, we spent the last year together, and we really, actually, I couldn't believe we could become closer. But once I was saved, and then she redeemed herself and went back to the altar and was rededicated, and just the feelings that her and I had with one another and the conversations were so deep, but they really weren't. It was just so easy to talk about everything, and in our Christian walk, and how we're all under the spectrum, and we're really looked at not only by by the evil of the world, but our old past really, oh, you're not a Christian. I seen you do this. Well, you don't know what you're talking about, you know. But that really reminded me of the closeness and the bond that I got with Mom. I love hearing stories like that where your moms or dads or siblings get back together, and it's through and in Christ that they can live with one another and start to understand one another. Because, like, I don't know about you, but I didn't understand my parents a bit when I was 20 years old. Or like,
no, I did not. I couldn't wait to get out. Like, I was like the day. I mean, the day I was able to, I was gone.
Right.
To have those times, I mean, those are definitely gifts from God, because that was 12, so it was 14. So it was like just 2 years later, my dad passed away of colon cancer.
Right.
So I mean, it was that time that we had that was really good, and actually kind of towards the end of it, my dad kind of had ideas that, we should talk to Deb, my cousin, about maybe joining our group,
Right.
So I did, and he did, and it was fantastic, and it was so interesting too, because I didn't really know my cousin all that well. We moved away pretty early on in my life, from all of our relatives in Colorado, and I didn't really grow up with any of my aunts and uncles or cousins, at all. So that was really kind of neat. I was probably about a month before he passed. I was on the verge. I was just getting ready to ask another friend of ours, a friend you know actually, to see if he wanted to join, because he had just, in passing one day, he was talking about how he was getting ready to read the Bible before he went into a shift at the firehouse, and I was like, read the Bible, and we had never, because it was we had a different kind of relationship back in the day,
Right.
We partied and we did, so it's like to hear him say that, I was like, that really took me back. And so it was right after my dad passed in 2014, I contacted him and said, hey, I'd really like you to do this. Me and my cousin do this, my dad used to, but he's passed, and I'd really like you to join it. And so he did, and that was 9 years ago. 9 years ago, and we have met often. I mean, not every 2 weeks, but as much as close as we can. Every 2 weeks for 9 years, we have met, and we've gone through studies. We've gone through Andy Stanley studies,
That's awesome.
studies, all different kinds of. We've been through some of the books, the book studies.
Right.
I'm trying to think of his name right now. Anyways, you would know it as soon as I said it, but it's a Mick name. I can't think of his name now. Anyways, John MacArthur. John MacArthur studies books, some of the books of the Bible. So we would do those, and that's actually, I never made it through the whole Bible with my dad, because with his cancer treatments, there's so many times when he couldn't keep up, and I still wasn't serious enough about keeping up to also keep up. But after he passed, the January after he passed, starting in 2015, I really made a point to start going through the Bible again through that same study. And I've done it every year. I'm starting my 10th year of going through it. And there'll be a lot of people that would hear that and be like, well, didn't you get what you get out of the first go through?
Right. And they just don't understand.
And I will tell them, like, listen, I can read this page in Romans 25 times today. And in a month, my life, everything about my world will be different. And I can read that same page again a month from now, and it will mean something completely different to me in a month or a year or 10 years, than it did when I read it the first time. People hear the whole concept of the description of the Bible being completely like a living Bible, a living word, and not understand what that means. And that's what it means. That's what it means. It means that no matter where you are, when you're reading it, how many times you've read it, it will always be something a little different. It'll be what you need every time.
And I think that's when we realized right then and there, I know it's when I realized that we serve, I've heard it all my life, but we serve a living God. And that is a living word that we're reading when we read the Word of God, the Bible. That's the way I see it. And that's why in my mind that changes all the time. It doesn't really change, but you see things from a different perspective. And I think another thing, and first of all, let me thank you for sharing that Bible plan, because right now Jenny and I are doing it with you, and it's our 5th week, I believe, starting out, and we're enjoying it tremendously. Her and I have set aside time to read a Bible and read at least a book or a chapter, or usually 2 chapters a day. We started that back last July or August. And when you showed me this Bible plan, I'm like, this is awesome. Because a lot of times you can get stuck on certain books, and it's like, oh my goodness, and they're going over genealogy, which is important, but it's like, wow, you go through 8-9 chapters of that, and it's like, whoo, you learn how to pronounce all the names, And but to me, the living Word of God, and it's so tremendous how He speaks to us through His Word, because that Word never changes, but yet your perspective of it and understanding of it does. It's just a wonderful thing. That's why I encourage people to read it all the time.
And I think the one good thing about this study, and I told you this when I gave it to you, the one good thing about this study is that frequently throughout the year, you will have, like within 1 week, and this study just, everybody that's listening to this, they haven't seen it yet, but it breaks up the Bible, not chronologically, but kind of in theme. You'll be in the Old Testament one day, and, it'll actually be something that Moses is doing, going to the desert, and then, like on Wednesday, King David is writing a psalm, and he's writing a psalm about that same chapter that same
right.
section you'd read about Genesis, and then by Saturday you're reading stuff from the New Testament where it's referring back to it. Like, such a great study, because it really, I've never done a study like this or been to a plan like this where it so clearly connects the Old and New Testament together.
Right.
You begin to see they are not two distinct pieces of the same book. It is one book, and everything is intertwined. And anyways, yes, we did digress. That's okay. That's part of my testimony. It changed along the way, and it still is. I still,
right.
As you do, I still make mistakes. I still, get angry when I drive, but it is different because when I look at every single day, and I think that's part of where you end up coming to, with your testimony as a Christian is,
right.
What does your day look like when you wake up? What does your day look like throughout the day? Why are you here? I think we're wired from the day we're born to, look for 3 questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going?
Right.
Not everybody cares about all 3 of those, answering those questions, but the reality is that's what we spend our entire lives chasing, is the answer to those 3 questions.
Absolutely.
And so I think for me anyways, I got the answer to all 3. While I get sad, I get angry, and I experience all the human emotions that a normal non-Christian would experience. It's all under an umbrella of peace, because I know exactly what my purpose is, and I know where I'm going after this.
Right. And Mark, I just appreciate you doing this. It's wonderful, and I just feel in my spirit, excuse me, I just feel in my spirit when we do these kind of things and have these kind of conversations live, if you will, the way we're doing it on a podcast. I really think, kind of like the 99 sheep and the one lost. If it helps just the one person, that's what I want.
Yep.
I'm not looking to save the world, because number one, I can't save anybody, but I can certainly lead you to where you can be saved. And it's just wonderful to talk with a person rather than grabbing an interview from someone else that's already pre-recorded, and I can't ask them any questions. It's like, man, if I could ask that guy one more question on that podcast, but now I've got you.
No, the ones.
And here we are.
The ones you have found are great. I've really, really enjoyed.
Oh, I'm glad.
Because when I listened to your very first podcast, I wasn't sure exactly what the format was going to be or where it was going to go, or some of the testimonies you'd found, how good they'd be and what I would think of them. But no, they've been just so fantastic. Every single one of them has been so fascinating to listen to people's journeys. And
right. Again, I appreciate you doing this, Mark, and tell Kimberly we give her all of our love and best, and we love you guys, and I think it's wonderful. This testimony is wonderful, and I look forward. Maybe we'll do it again down the road with some of your other testimonies you may have tucked away back in there.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I'd really enjoy that. This has been a lot of fun, and I definitely have enjoyed your podcast at this point in time. So
well, I hope so.
Keep them coming.
Keep sharing them. Keep sharing them, and if you
I will. Yeah. But it's interesting. Those verses the verse of the day, because that is definitely part of this testimony as well.
Well, fantastic, Mark. Again, I thank you, brother, and be good out there in Arizona. Enjoy that weather. And that's where I ended it there, friends. Mark and I could probably have talked another couple hours anyway. We don't see each other as much as we used to. We'll comment to one another and send pictures and what have you on social media. But to have just this great conversation together, that doesn't happen all the time. So that was a wonderful chance just for me to sit down and talk to Mark, and I just hope you enjoyed it. It's a wonderful testimony. It's kind of unique in the fact that, everyone has their own testimony. Everyone has their own and different testimony of their walk in life in general, not to mention of how good and how wonderful God has been to them and what he's done for them throughout their lives, especially during their Christian journey. And Mark, from birth on until he was basically starting in college, he was following Christ. He was with his parents, and he knew, and he was saved. and he fell away as he got into the world and experienced the world out there without the supervision of his parents and without carrying the message of Christ with him. Now, he knew it, and he did some campus crusades and what have you, as you've already heard. But it's just a wonderful testimony of how a person goes through their life. And we're fortunate enough to have been on this earth a little over half a century, so some of his walk was just incredible, that he was moments away from suicide. And I'm sure that'll be another testimony for another day. But I really appreciate everyone's attention, and I hope the audio works out for us. It took me a good week and a half to go through the entire thing and edit out a lot and change some of the heights and lows of the voices. It was different doing it on a telephone conversation. And I promise you, to all my faithful listeners and followers, that we will clean that up. I promise you. Enjoy the verse of the day. And again, I apologize for it taking a little longer than it would usually does for me to put out a podcast, but I've got to get these settings correct on these audio with the phone interviews and those kind of things. But I love you. I love you each and every one. And God willing, and I know he will be, you'll be having another podcast following this one probably in a day or two, because I got a wonderful testimony about a baptism I was able to participate in. And a couple other ones I've been working on are almost ready to be published anyway. So enjoy this. Share it with as many people as you can that you think would like it. And just let them hear how this is probably everybody's testimony at some point or time, just their own little walk with Jesus. Friends, enjoy it. Tuck it away. Share it if you can. And continue your walk with Christ. And as always, stay blessed.